Okay. Yep. Now visible? Brilliant. So let's start with the third chapter, that is Union Budget. We'll quickly rush through this chapter because it's one of the simplest chapter in the entire curriculum. Now these facts overview which are given in the reference material, very important from exam point of view. I expect at least a question from this particular part of the chapter. So please take note of all the important facts. For example, the first budget of independent India was presented. So here there is a possibility of a little confusion if you read the first line. It says first Indian budget was presented by Mr. James Wilson on February 18, 1869. After Indian budget was introduced on April 7, 1860. So in the same statement, there are two dates coming. So you have to be really careful. What is the question? Is it about when was the Indian budget introduced or when was the first Indian budget presented? Depending on that, you will have to select the right answer. So please take note of what the question is and then only go ahead and answer. Then first budget of independent India. So again, you will have to be a little careful in the question what is being asked. Is it about Indian budget or Indian first budget of the independent India? So accordingly, your answer will have to be selected. Now, first finance minister who presented the budget for independent India was Mr. R.K. Shanmugam Chetty. Few important changes which happened in the budget process was, first, the budget used to be presented at 5 p.m. and from 2001, the timing of presenting the budget changed from 5 p.m. to 11 a.m. Again, till 2017, the budget was presented on the last working day of February, and from 2017, it was changed from last working day to first working day of February. Again, an important change. Then there were two finance ministers who never got an opportunity to present an Indian budget. Those were K.C. Nevgi and Mr. H.N. Bahuguna. And the highest number of budgets presented by Mr. Morarji Desai were 10 budgets. He presented 10 budgets during while he was the finance minister in different terms. Another important change in the year 2017, the day on which the budget used to be presented also got changed. At the same time, the union and rail budget also, which were presented earlier, got merged and were presented in the same budget. So those were not presented separately as it used to be a practice earlier. Rail budget always used to be presented first and then the following day union budget used to be presented. But since 2017, this practice also has been undergone a change and both are presented together now. Now, there are few terminologies which we really need to be we need to understand from the budget perspective. One important advice which I would want to give you is India has a separate website dedicated for union budgets. You can go on the website and read the content, including the speech which was given by the finance minister while presenting the budget. So it would be really interesting if you can go on the web portal and just for your understanding purpose, go through the contents of any one budget. It will be really interesting and it will be insightful for you also. Now, key terminologies which are covered under the budget. One important thing you will be, which you might be aware. I will post the link. Otherwise, you can just go to the Google. It's, I think, indianunionbudget.gov.in is the site. Any site ending with gov.in for the budget will be the site. Now, the power to the government to present the budget is derived from Constitution of India. However, it is very surprising that the Constitution of India does not uses the word budget. It uses the word annual financial statement. So in the Constitution, in the Article 112, the powers are given to the government to present to the Parliament a statement of estimated receipts and expenditures for every financial year. And that's what budget is. So the Constitution does not uses the word budget, it uses the word annual financial statement. It's a 10-page document which is divided into three parts, which is consolidated fund, contingency fund, and a public account. So budget or annual financial statement consists of three parts: consolidated fund, contingency fund, and public account. Now let's understand these three terminologies also one by one. First is, let's say, contingency fund. As the name itself suggests, this is a fund which is created for emergencies, for contingencies. Any amount which has to be drawn from the contingency fund requires an assent from the President of India and Parliament also. Without the consent of the President, no amount can be drawn from contingency fund. Secondly, it's a fund which has 500 crore INR into that. And if any amount is drawn from that fund, immediately that amount has to be deposited back in the fund and the money is taken from the consolidated fund. So whenever a contingency fund is used, the amount is replaced immediately by drawing from consolidated fund and depositing it back in the contingency fund. As regards public account is concerned, the government is merely a banker there. It's the money which is a liability to the government. So as such, that money is not of use to the government. It's the balance which is payable by the government to general public. What will be the deposits in the public account? The public provident fund balances which the people deposit goes to the government. Now that is a liability of the government, hence that account is maintained separately. Then we are left with consolidated fund, which is the main fund of all the funds which are available to the government. In this fund, every revenue raised by the government, be it tax revenue, be it non-tax revenue, any receipts by the government from the borrowings, from sale of their assets, from disinvestment of their shares in any public sector undertakings, any inflow to the government goes to the consolidated fund. From consolidated fund, all the expenditures of the government are met, including capital expenditure, including revenue expenditure. However, this fund, any amount which has to be withdrawn from this fund needs a consent from the Parliament. And that's why the budget is presented. In the budget, what are the proposals government is submitting for drawal of funds from consolidated fund are discussed and decided in the parliament, and only after the consent of the parliament the money is withdrawn. Now, consolidated fund provisions are given under Article 266 of the Constitution of India. But there is a process through which the money is withdrawn from consolidated fund. So, like in any family, it will also happen whenever the head of the family receives a salary. First, they decide which is the most important expense, any tuition fees to be paid, any expense to be met. So they keep setting aside the money which is to be spent. Similarly, there is a process which is followed for taking consent from the parliament for money to be drawn from the consolidated fund. The first proposal for withdrawing the funds from consolidated fund is called as demand for grants. Now, demand for grants is nothing but every department, every ministry of the government, including state governments, submits their proposal to the government that during the entire financial year, we will need this much amount of money for XYZ purposes. Normally, one department is given an opportunity to present one demand, but there are ministries which are large ministries like defense. They are allowed to submit more than one demand also. Ideally, it is a proposal submitted by the state government, ministries, departments, asking for the funds from the government. So, demand for grants, the provision is given in Article 113. And the demand for grants submitted by the state governments, union territory governments, ministries is presented in the parliament and is discussed and voted upon. So that's the first way in which the funds are withdrawn from the consolidated fund. After demand for grants, the government submits appropriation bill. Now, appropriation bill is primarily the proposal to withdraw funds from consolidated fund to meet the expenditures of the government for the next entire financial year. So appropriation bill is more for whatever funds the government is going to need for the entire year to maintain their expenditures, that is submitted through appropriation bill. Again, the amount is or proposal is submitted before the parliament, but the proposal is submitted after the demand for grants have been voted upon, so that we come to know how much is the balance remaining, and then the further matters are taken. The next bill which is presented before the parliament is finance bill. Now, finance bill is the bill which proposes the changes which are required to be introduced in the tax reforms. So if the tax rate has to be changed, if any new tax has to be introduced, if any provision of the existing tax structure has to be modified, all these proposals are submitted through a finance bill. So this is the most talked bill. Whenever a budget is presented, people analyze what is the impact of the new tax regime which government has introduced. So like in the last union budget, the government reduced the corporate tax rate to 25%. Then certain benefits were introduced for the companies who will set up new manufacturing plants under Make in India regime. So these were kind of reforms are proposed or introduced through the finance bill. Now, finance bill is accompanied by a memorandum which contains the explanation of the provisions which are included. So I really suggest, if you want to have more clarity on this, go and read any budget, actual budget. So you will understand what is the content of finance bill and what is the memorandum which is mentioned over here. So you can take out half an hour of your day. It won't take much of your time. You don't need to analyze or dissect the entire budget, but you really need to go through what are the contents so that you have conceptual clarity over here. Contingency fund we have discussed, public account we have discussed. Now there are two types of expenditures and two types of receipts of the government, which is revenue and capital. So let's first talk about the expenditure part. What is revenue expenditure? Now, all of you, you are a student of commerce, so you know what is profit and loss account and what is balance sheet. If I have to simply put across to you the difference between the two, revenue expenditure is those expenses which goes to the profit and loss account, which means those are the expenses which pertain to the particular financial year, which means those are the expenditures which are not for creation of an asset. It is an expense which was incurred during the year, and the benefit of that was also accrued and utilized during that particular year. Any expenditure whose benefit is going to last for more than one financial year, that expenditure goes to capital expenditure, which goes to the balance sheet. So this is the simplest. Okay, all of you are asking me where do I get the link? Okay, at the end of the session, I will post the website link for all of you where you can go and check the budgets of previous years. Janvi saying, please repeat. Revenue expenditure, you want me to repeat? Yes, okay. So revenue expenditure means any expenditure which the benefit of which is utilized during the same financial year. So you pay salary, the benefit is received during that year only. You pay interest on loan, it is for that particular year only. You incur advertisement expenses, the advertisements are broadcast during the same financial year, then it's a revenue expenditure. But let's say you have booked a contract for next 5 years and you have paid advertisement cost for next 5 years. Then what you have paid is for 5 financial year. It is not the expense for financial year. It is a prepaid expense, and prepaid expense goes to balance sheet because the benefit of this expense is going to accrue in more than one financial year. So you buy a laptop, it's a capital expenditure, but you subscribe to a cellular plan for a month, you recharge your phone for a month, that is a revenue expenditure. You buy a phone, that can be a capital expenditure. Clear? So revenue, the benefit is accruing during the same financial year. Capital benefit will accrue in more than one financial. This is the simplest definition you can remember. So if you'll see the balance sheet, you will see only those assets. Assets means what? You are going to use for a longer time. If you have already utilized it, it's your expense. So that's the difference between capital expenditure and revenue expenditure. Clear? Next. Similar to expenditure, let's also understand the difference between AFS and budget are the same? Yes. Annual financial statement and budget is one and the same thing. As I said in the beginning, the constitution does not use the word budget. It's what we use in the common parlance. Constitution has used the word annual financial statements. Now let's discuss about revenue receipts and capital receipts. Revenue receipts means primarily your income. Any income which goes to profit and loss account income side is revenue receipt. Any income which is for more than one financial year, for example, you have received an advance from a customer, then it's an advance received. It's in income definitely, but it will become income when you have supplied the goods and services. Similarly, for government also, any revenue. Now, what are the sources of revenue to the government? One, the most prime source is tax revenue. The taxes they levy. Second type of revenue source for the government is the dividend or the profits which government receives from government undertakings. That is a non-tax revenue. Third, when if a government has invested in the shares of a government of a company, and when they sell their shares, they receive some profit. That is also a receipt, which is a non-tax revenue receipt. Right? Now, inflow to the government is receipt. Now let's understand and bifurcate what will go to the revenue and what will go to the capital. Any loan received, any loan taken by the government is a liability. It's not an income. So all such receipts will go to capital receipts. Similarly, if the government has invested in the shares of public undertaking, and they realize their assets, then whatever the government receives back by selling their assets also is a capital receipt. But the profit which accrues on selling of an asset, that is a revenue receipt because that's an income. But the capital portion of the assets goes to the capital receipt side. Clear? Subsidies we discussed yesterday. Subsidies is the kind of reward which government gives to those undertakings, those business enterprises who decide to venture or create an organization for providing those services which are essential nature, but no one is willing to enter into that industry. So whenever government wants to promote something, they attract the entrepreneurs by giving them subsidies. For example, in the recent past, government had announced scheme for giving subsidies for those businesses who will create and set up cold storages in the areas where there is a supply of perishable goods, and because of non-availability of sufficient infrastructure, the stock of perishable goods either has to be sold at whatever price possible or has to be destroyed or gets wasted. So government invited participation from private sector that come and create cold storages and we will provide you subsidy. Now that is a cost to the government because no one is willing to create it, and government wants private enterprises to come and provide those services or facilities, and to attract them the subsidies are offered. So this is all about revenue and capital expenditure and receipts. When a government creates a budget of revenue receipts and revenue expenditures, we call that as a revenue budget. But when the government creates a budget of capital receipts and capital expenditures, we call that as a capital budget. Yes, Goranshi, you're right. If it is for more than one financial year, it will come under deferred revenue expenditure. You've used the right terminology. Okay. The last concept we will discuss about this chapter is the fiscal deficit. Now, fiscal deficit means what? Fiscal deficit is when your expenditures are more than your income, which means your expenditures are more, but the sources to meet those expenditures are less. So when you have to spend 1 lakh rupees and you have only 80,000, you will have to borrow that 20,000 to meet those expenditures, or you will have to curtail down on your expenditures. For individuals, they may curtail down on the expenditure. For government, it is not always possible to defer the expenditures. Yes, demand for grants is obviously the withdrawal from the fund, so it is an expenditure. Now, India has always presented a deficit budget, which means the expenditures are always more than the. Anjali is asking deferred revenue in capital. Okay, when you get something in the form of an asset, it's a capital expenditure. But if it is a prepaid expenditure, to give you an example, it is a deferred revenue expenditure. But that's not important from this chapter perspective. India has always presented demand for grants or revenue. Now depends on the proposal. Depends on the proposal. If the ministry has submitted a proposal to incur a capital expenditure, it will be a capital expenditure. It can be also. Expenditure. Expenditure means government incurs a lot of expenses. Subsidy is an expenditure. Then the amount they spent on creating roads, infrastructure development, it is an expenditure for the government. What is fiscal deficit as per individual and government? Expenditure budget. So it is not nothing but a statement of what expenditures are planned or proposed for the next year. Deficit is always negative, dear. Surplus is positive, deficit is negative. You have only MCQs which are going to come in the entire exam. As I said, disinvestment proceeds are capital receipts, but the profit, excuse me, the profit will go to the revenue. Any expenditure on creating an asset infrastructure is a capital expenditure. So deficit budget is what government has been presenting, because in India we have expenditures more than what we have the revenues. Now, when the difference between revenue receipts and revenue expenditure is what we call it as revenue deficit or revenue surplus. But when you consider the total expenditure, capital expenditure plus revenue expenditure minus capital receipts and revenue receipts is what you get as a fiscal deficit. So let's understand all these terminologies with this example which is there. Now revenue expenditures and revenue receipts, the difference is revenue deficit. Revenue expenditure minus revenue receipts, you will get revenue deficit. Fiscal deficit is total expenditure minus total receipts. Now these deficits are always present in percentage of the GDP. So 0.6, 3.5. And then we have this terminology called primary deficit. So I have already written the explanation of that. Fiscal deficit minus interest payments. So that is the difference between fiscal deficit and primary deficit. So if we look at the actual numbers, the fiscal deficit is 5,91,062 crores and primary deficit is 62,110. So the difference is the interest on the borrowings which government is paying. Clear? Okay, so this is all about the third chapter. Let's jump on to the next chapter. Those of you who have additional questions on this chapter, please put it in the chat box. I will take it in the end. As of now, I don't see an unanswered question. Fiscal deficit includes borrowings? No. The deficit has to be met by way of borrowings. External grants. So if any grant is received by the government from any external agency, it can be WTO, it can be IMF. Is deficit good for government? Deficit is never good. Only type of deficit which is good is calorie deficit if you are on a fitness diet. Rest all deficits, in my opinion, are not good. You always want a surplus. No, you don't need to learn the data in the fiscal deficit. It is for your understanding. Okay. Now let's start with the next chapter. I have a PPT already created. So let's refer that. Primary deficit is equals to fiscal deficit minus interest payment. Right, you're correct. Okay. Just give me one moment. I'll be back. WTO is World Trade Organization. Okay. Okay. Now let's start with the next chapter. Very interesting one. Now, in this chapter, the objective is to understand the evolution of Indian financial markets. What are financial markets? Understand the entire financial ecosystem. What consists of entire financial market? For example, there are two types of financial markets: money market, capital market. So, what consists of money market? When what was established? Similarly, the same to be studied for capital markets. Now, economic development of any nation depends largely on the financial structure of that economy. Now, what is a good financial system or a good financial uh, structure? The objective of any financial system is to mobilize the saving. That is the most primary objective of any financial system. If households, last session we discussed that households are those who provide resources to the businesses in terms of land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurs. Now, that portion, that capital, is what is investment. Similarly, all the income which accrues to the households, if that does not get channelized in the market again, in the economy again, for example, the savings, if that does not get injected again in the market, in the economy, then it is a leakage from the economy, is what we discussed. Why it is a leakage? So if I have earned and I have saved 1 lakh rupees, but I don't put it back in the bank, but I keep that money in my at my home in my locker, that money is of no use to the nation. I may use it whenever I need to spend it, but till the time it is my saving, it is of no use. Hence, the intention of the government is to mobilize the savings. When the money comes in the market, it can be deployed in the best possible manner. Hence, the second objective is to provide funds to those who need it. So, if I have 1 lakh, I give it to the bank gives it as a loan to an undertaking which needs funds for some business purposes. Now, when this transaction happens, then there is a economic activity which has generated, which has led to increase in national output, which has resulted in increase of my return on investments. Similarly, like this, the objective of financial market also is to ensure that these transactions which happens in the market are not detrimental to the interest of anyone involved in the economy. So neither the one who is providing funds should take the advantage of the one who is needing funds, nor the one who has taken the loan should do anything which is against the interest of the lender. There has to be a regulator who facilitates these transactions to happen. Hence, over a period of time, there has been a constant evolution in the financial market. You all would have seen in the movie Guru, where a stock market was shown, where people were shouting the rates and then the trade used to happen. From those times to today, sitting at home on a mobile handheld device, someone is able to do the transaction on the stock exchange. Now, this is nothing but the evolution. So that is the another objective of a financial market of the government, to develop the financial market, keeping the interests of all the stakeholders. And lastly, because it's a very sensitive subject, because it is a subject which is related to the savings of the public at large, no one should take the advantage of the other. And considering the complex structure, the importance of the role of a professional or an advisor increases multifold in the financial market. Therefore, we have mutual funds which have come into existence because it is not possible for everyone to invest in the stock exchange. Yeah, it's there already in the drive, the PDF. Like stock exchange, so not everyone has that skill sets or a knowledge to invest in the secondary market. We have seen people committing suicides because of one wrong decisions in the stock exchange. Hence, there are mutual funds which were created so that the professionals take care of that role of deciding where to invest and how much. Now, that's what the overview or the objective of any good financial ecosystem is. We'll discuss the secondary market, we'll discuss. Now, this is what exactly happens. The slide is not getting changed. Yeah. Now, this is what typically happens. So there is a section of society which we call it as lenders who have surplus money, and at the other end we have borrowers who need money, who are in deficit. So that surplus is provided to the borrowers through an intermediary, which we call it as bank, insurance, mutual fund entities, financial enterprises, pension funds, non-banking financial companies. All these are intermediaries who are facilitating the transactions between the two section of society, lenders and borrowers. Now there are two types of market, as I said. One, money market, and second, capital market. Slide is not changing. Mm-mm. Okay, just 1 minute. Yeah, back. Some issue with the internet. Sorry, interruption. Yeah. So we have two types of market which are a part of financial system. One money market and second is capital market. Money market primarily is to cater the short-term, medium-term or long-term financial needs of the people consisting of individuals, households or businesses. In the money market, the regulator is the Reserve Bank of India and the intermediaries which are a part of money market are non-banking financial companies, cooperative banks, regional rural banks, private money lenders. All these are a part of money market. Have capital market, which is more of an institutional arrangement. Now there are two categories in the capital market. One is a primary market, second is a secondary market. Now secondary market is nothing but a stock exchange where the facilities provided to the investors that they can trade in the investment which they have made in the shares. Primary market is a market for the companies who want to raise capital from general public. Now for capital market, the regulator is, okay, I will update it in the drive. Now primary market and capital market, secondary market, both the regulator is SEBI, Stock Exchange Securities Exchange Board of India. Now, some of the noteworthy developments which have happened in the financial system, the foremost objective of the government is to channelize the savings. Hence, the penetration of banking system in the rural and semi-urban areas is very, very important. So, some of the noteworthy developments which have happened. Financial inclusion drive from RBI has expanded the target market to semi-urban and rural areas. And very recently, there was also a news that cooperative banks will also now come under the purview of Reserve Bank of India. So cooperative banks are nothing but a cooperative societies. So they are also regulated by Cooperative Societies Act. And because they are into banking activities, they are also regulated by Reserve Bank of India. Now, why this is important? Because in most of the rural areas, what you will normally find is either a Bank of Maharashtra, State Bank of India, which are the nationalized bank, or you will find cooperative banks only. Hence, in this financial inclusion drive, what RBI has been attempting is to reach out to the semi-urban and rural areas so that their savings can also be channelized and that can also be utilized in the productive and economic activities. The investment corporation in Indian insurance sector can rise to US 1 trillion by 2025. So channelize means mobilize it into the system. Credit, insurance and investment penetration is rising in rural areas. HNI's high net worth individual participation is growing in the wealth management segment. Rather, most of the investment which happens in the startup entities is from HNIs. Now, HNIs are a category of investors, as the name itself suggests, high net worth individuals. So from that class, maximum investment is made in the startups. Lower mutual fund penetration of 5 to 6% reflects latent growth opportunities. Now, mutual fund is one of the most promoted investment option where you or someone, yes, we call them as angel investors, right? Now, mutual fund is a very, very promising area, and if the growth rate is only 5 to 6%, then there is a huge opportunity in that segment, because mutual fund eliminates the risks of a private investor who invests directly in the stock exchange. Now, the mutual fund has one advantage, that if I put money in mutual fund, then I really don't need to bother about in which shares, in which stock the capital is invested. What is important is, have I selected the mutual fund which suits my profile or my risk preference? If I am an investor who is willing to take risks, then I will invest in a fund which is a growth fund. So we'll discuss about the different types of in the further slides. We have a separate slide dedicated for mutual fund. The government has launched Indian Post Bank. Now, post office has a very good network in India. You will find post office in smallest of the villages. So very smartly, government has converted the post offices into the post payments bank, so that the reach can be increased in the rural areas. India benefits from large cross utilization of channels to expand the reach of financial services. Maharashtra has launched its mobile facility, wallet facility, allowing transfer of funds from other mobile wallets. So now everyone is very well accustomed to this new form of doing transactions, which is digital form of doing payments, digital form of receiving payments. It's very much into the system now, and even the vegetable vendors, even the small shops have the facility where you can make the payment using a mobile wallet. Paytm, Google Pay, then Amazon Pay, then Phone Pay, all these are popular mobile wallet. And this all started when RBI started came up with this idea of payment and settlement system. So they came out with an act in the year 2007, which kind of innovated this kind of digital transaction, and it got the boost when the demonetization was announced. As of October 18, the Financial Inclusion Lab has selected 11 fintech innovators. Now, fintech is a terminology used to define the company which is a technology company, which is an IT company, which is creating a software, but for the finance. To which we are exposed, which is cyber crimes. So the technology, the security features in the technology also has to go to the next level, so as to prevent all these cyber crimes from happening. And that is where these fintech organizations come into play. So there are 11 fintech innovators which have been identified, and investment of 9.5 million. Am I not audible? From my end, it's working fine. Yeah, so $9.5 million have been identified and invested in the 11 fintech organizations. And this entire initiative is promoted by IIM Ahmedabad's Bharat Inclusion Initiative. And some of the organizations which are partnering in this mission are JP Morgan, which is again a very big financial institution, Michael and Dale Foundation, a very renowned NGO, and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, again a very renowned, very famous non-profit organization. So in partnership with these, there is a project where 11 fintech companies have been identified. Fintech are those companies, those IT companies which are creating softwares and platforms for finance sector. Now, government has also approved new banking licenses and increased the FDI limit in insurance. Earlier, the insurance sector FDI limit was 26%, which has now been increased to 49. We saw that yesterday in one of the slides. So what is the intention by giving new banking licenses? Again, to increase the reach, to increase the penetration in the market. And second, when you open the FDI, when you increase the FDI, we are also inviting foreign investors to come and set up their businesses in insurance and banking sector. Now, these initiatives have been taken recently. Okay, fintech once again, fintech. So any IT company. So there is a company called FinIQ. Then there is a company called 42 Labs. There are all of you are a user of internet banking, right? And any internet banking facility provided by the bank is an encrypted technology where you are provided passwords, and when you want to do a transaction, you receive an OTP. Now, entire software, this platform which is created, is not created by the bank. It's created by some IT company for the bank. So such companies which create softwares and platforms with necessary security features and encryption, that companies are called as fintech organization. IT companies working only for finance sector. Now let's come to the banking sector where RBI is the regulator. There are different types of banks in India. The most popular one are commercial banks. Now, commercial banks are again categorized into public sector banks. So, Canara Bank, Indian Bank, Bank of India, State Bank of India, Punjab National Bank, all these banks are public sector banks where government is the owner of those banks or the majority shareholder. Then there are private sector banks. The difference between public sector and private sector bank is the private sector banks are owned by private shareholders. The government may have the share in the private sector banks also, but their share will be negligible. Then we have regional rural banks. Now, this is again a type of bank which has huge penetration in the rural sector. So there are Grameen banks, lot of Grameen banks doing business in the rural parts of the country. And lastly, we have foreign banks. Foreign banks are those banks which have their head offices in the overseas country, but they have a place of business in India. Such banks are foreign banks. So we have Bank of Tokyo, Bank of America, Bank of Mitsubishi, Barclays Bank. All these are foreign banks having a license to do business in India, but they are primarily having their head offices in foreign country. Yes, HSBC, Standard Chartered, Citi. Next is small finance bank. Now the name itself suggests that they are into providing small finances. So there is a large section of society who are small and micro enterprises. The level of investment in their businesses is very small and they are very unorganized. So they are not a private limited company or a partnership firm where they have a regulator regulating the transactions. Many small proprietor firms are unorganized sector. So a person who is driving an auto rickshaw is a very small business person, very unorganized sector, and their financial needs are also not huge. So to provide short-term loans to such players, unorganized sectors, there are small finance banks. Third category is payment bank. Payment banks are those banks which have the risk. Only facility they have is to facilitate payment of money. So Paytm, all these wallets, Indian Post Payments Bank are nothing but payment banks where you have a limit up to which you can deposit the money. For example, 1 lakh is the maximum money which can be deposited in this payments bank, and primarily you use these accounts to make the payment, digital payments. The last type of banks we find in India are cooperative banks. As I said a little while ago, these are cooperative societies having a banking license. Now, every state has one state cooperative bank, which is the head of all the cooperative banks operating in that state. Under that, there are two types of cooperative banks. One, which are urban cooperative banks, which means they have their primary businesses in urban cities. And then there are rural cooperative banks where they have place of business in the rural parts of the country. Now, further explanation on commercial banks. These numbers which are there in the bracket are the number of banks operating in India. So 20 public sector banks, and there is a proposal to reduce this number of 20 to 10 and from 10 to 4, and a lot of amalgamations, mergers are going to happen in public sector banks. Some are already in process, some are already on the verge of closure. So government in the last union budget also, the finance minister had said, indicated that we don't want so many banks to operate, rather we will consolidate the banks, merge the banks, so that the bank which remain can enjoy the benefit of economy of scale. Yes. Then private sector, we have 22 banks operating in India. Regional rural banks, we have 56 banks operating in India. Now, Grameen banks are regional rural banks. These banks are also enlisted to pay wages under the scheme of national recruitment, pension distribution in the rural and semi-urban areas also is covered under regional rural banks powers. Foreign banks are those banks where head office is in foreign uh, countries and their operations are in India. Cooperative banks, as I said, there are three types of cooperative bank. One is a state cooperative bank, which every state will have one, which is a kind of federation, which is a part of federation of central cooperative banks. And urban and rural cooperative banks are under the powers of state cooperative bank. So urban banks are located in urban and semi-urban areas. Rural cooperative banks are in the rural areas. The number of rural cooperative banks, if you can see, it can indicate how much is the penetration of cooperative banks in the rural parts of the country. So 94,384 banks in operation. Then we have small finance bank, which are also governed under Section 22 of Banking Regulation Act 1949. They are also governed by rural bank. An example you want? Okay. So there are a lot of Grameen banks given. Just a second, if you. The list is given in the module. So Maharashtra has, or rather India has a lot of Grameen banks. So Maharashtra Grameen Bank. Then there are, let me check the list. Andhra Pragati Grameen Bank, Arunachal Pradesh. There are many Grameen banks which are operating in the rural parts of the country. As we discussed ago, small finance bank, the objective is to provide banking facility to small micro industries which are unorganized sectors, small farmers, etc. Examples are Ujjivan Small Finance Bank, Jan Lakshmi Small Finance Bank, and likewise. Exim banks, I got your question. Give me some time. We have that in our coverage. So give me some time. We'll go there. Payments bank, as I said, it's a new concept. They are accept restricted deposit amount is 1 lakh. New concept, services offered are debit card, net banking, mobile banking, etc. Credit card also, now you will say the also issuing credit cards. That is because they have got the banking license. Not as a wallet they are offering the card because they have got a banking license. Examples are Indian Post Payments Bank, Paytm, Airtel Money. All these are examples of payments bank. So the major differences are, can they provide loan? Payments bank cannot provide loan. They cannot issue credit cards, and the restriction is on deposit of, yes, maximum limit is 1 lakh. Earlier, I think 20,000, it was increased to. Okay, so about the evolution of banking sector in India, 1921, we had only one major bank in India, and it's about the era where we were still ruled by the Britishers. So we had Imperial Bank of India, which later on went on to become a State Bank of India. 1955. 1935, the RBI Act was passed and a central bank of the nation was created, which is Reserve Bank of India. And the act was passed in 1934. Still, the act is same. RBI is still governed by the Act, RBI Act 1934. Prior to RBI, the Imperial Bank was the bank, was acting as a central bank, and the moment RBI was created, RBI became the central bank. 1956 to 2000, nationalization of 14 commercial banks in 1969 and 6 more banks in 1980. Then there was entry of private players which intensified the competition, and then we have seen technology upgradation in the banks. So that has been one of the important. Now, NBFC is a type of financial institution which provide the loans, which provide the facilities of investment, but they cannot accept demand deposits. What are demand deposits? Demand deposit means you go to bank, you deposit the money, and you can next moment go and ask for the withdrawal. So that facility cannot be provided by NBFC, which means they cannot accept deposits from public, which are demand deposits. In 2003, the first NBFC, which was Kotak Mahindra Finance Limited, became the bank which, so time an NBFC was converted into a bank. So important from exam point of view, which was the bank or NBFC which received banking license from RBI. And now that Kotak Mahindra Finance Limited is known as Kotak Mahindra Bank. In 2009, government removed banking cash transaction tax, which was introduced in the year 2005 by the finance minister Chidambaram. In 2018, as per Union Budget 1920, provision coverage ratio of banks reached highest in 7 years. As per RBI, as of November 30, 2018, India recorded foreign exchange reserves of approximately 393.72 billion. Some of the facts to remember from exam point of view, some statistical data. 5,98,093 banking outlets were provided in villages as on March 2017. This is under the financial inclusion plan which was initiated by Reserve Bank of India. Now this is about banking. Let's talk about the mutual funds. Some of you had questions on what is mutual fund. To put it very simple, mutual fund is an investment security that enables the investors to pool their money together into one professionally managed institute. Mutual funds can invest in stocks, bonds, cash, or combination of those assets. Now, as I said, stock market is very volatile, and you would have heard or seen in the news, stock market crashed, stock market on the bull. Yes, you can download it from the link which I have provided, PPT. So in order to provide a facility to the investor where they don't have to worry about the volatility of the stock exchange, because this market does not functions on fundamentals, this functions on rumors also, this functions on news also. One rumor and the mutual fund, the stock market can either crash. Okay, I will send the link again at the end of the session. If someone has it handy, you can also. Okay, I'll do that. Now, mutual fund hence offers this facility that whatever money you have to invest, you decide the amount, and you also decide what is the kind of investment you want to make. Thank you, Ria. So if I am a person who does not want to take a risk, there is a type of fund which is available which are called as income fund, which means there is no risk. The money will be deployed in the no risk or low risk securities, and therefore the return also will be a little less, because higher the risk, higher the return. That's the principle on which the market functions. Similarly, if there is an investor who says, I am willing to take some risk, but I also want some security. So then there are balanced funds which are available, where if you invest, let's say 20,000, part of the money will go to low risk securities, part will go to the high risk securities, so that your risk appetite, your risk is mitigated to a large extent. Then there can be a investor or person who says, for this much money I am willing to take a risk, let me take that risk. Then there are growth funds which are available. So what is mutual fund? It's a pool where people invest money and money is collected together, and then there is a group of experts, we call it as asset management companies, who decide where that money has to be deployed. So there are different types of mutual funds. There are multi-cap funds, there are 25 large cap funds, there are nifty funds. So there are different invest funds are created, and there are professionals, fund managers who decides where to put that money, right? Hence, if you'll have seen a advertisement of any mutual fund, at the end they also say that mutual funds are also subject to market risks. Please read the offer document carefully before investing. So it's not that there is no risk in the mutual fund, but because you have delegated a task to the expert, your risk is to some extent taken care of. Now, all this started in the year 1963 when government passed an act, UTI Act, in the year 1963, and an organization was created, Unit Trust of India. And the first mutual fund in India was US 64 scheme. So the entire evolution of mutual fund can be divided into 5 phases. The first phase is when the UTI was created, and subsequently it got delinked also. So 1978, UTI was delinked from RBI. Earlier the regulator was RBI, then it was delinked and IDBI was appointed as a regulator to regulate UTI. As of 1988, the total assets under management with Unit Trust of India, first mutual fund is UTI, yes. 6,700 crores of assets were under management. That means that much money was there in the stock market. In 1987, entry of public sector mutual fund was also allowed. So private public sector undertakings, LIC, GIC, were allowed to create their mutual funds. And SBI became the first non-UTI mutual fund. Then came Canara Bank's mutual fund, then PNB mutual fund, then Indian Bank, then Bank of India, Bank of Baroda, LIC, GIC, all followed and introduced their funds. Now, during that time, it was also realized that we need to have a regulator to take control of the happenings in the stock exchange. Hence, 1992, SEBI was established, and in 1993, US 64 was the scheme introduced by UTI. So, first mutual fund scheme was US 64. First organization to bring a mutual fund was UTI. Now, 1993, SEBI created first set of mutual fund regulations which were applicable to all except UTI because UTI was governed by an act of parliament passed in 1963. Kothari Pioneer, which later on got merged into Franklin Templeton, which is again a very big player in the mutual fund sector, was the first private sector mutual fund which was introduced in the year 1993. Yes, these years are important. Yes, the government is promoting mutual funds so that it's a way in which the money gets channelized into the economy. 1996, SEBI revised mutual fund regulations. January 2003, 33 mutual funds were there in all, with total asset under management of 1,21,805 crores, of which one third was almost with UTI. This was the third phase. The fourth phase, when UTI was repealed and two different undertakings were created. So, Specified Undertaking of Unit Trust of India (UTI) was one entity, which is also a mutual fund of the government, which is owned by government, and UTI Mutual Fund was created where, where public investments were there. In 2008, there was a global meltdown. So Lehman Brothers, the economic crisis started from 2008, and whenever any crisis happens, the investment from the stock market are pulled, and the market saw the depression. So the industry, mutual fund industry also struggled from 2009 to 2013. Later on, SEBI started taking aggressive measures, and some of you, as rightly said, they started advertising aggressively, promoting mutual funds. Specified Undertaking of UTI. 2014 May, steady inflows resumed with the increase in investors, and the number of the industry's asset under management has crossed substantially, and this sector has continued to grow. Still, there is a big opportunity available because the growth which we are seeing is still not what the potential is. Hence, government is promoting aggressively because this, unfortunately, Navina, yes, you will have to remember important factual information. So let's take a pause here. Let's stop here. We will continue the discussion further from tomorrow at 11:15. We'll complete this chapter and the next chapter. So then on the last day, we will cover the remaining portion. I think we will manage it. Don't worry about the coverage. We'll figure out how to cover the remaining part. Okay, thank you so much, and I'll connect with you again tomorrow. If you have any questions, you have my email ID. Please write it to me. I have a habit of replying to the emails in 24 hours. So don't hesitate. You can write to me. I will upload this updated PT on the drive. Thank you so much and stay safe. Take care. Thank you. Thank you, Nandini. Thank you for your kind words. Means a lot.